Greetings! Welcome to the devlog for update 38 of Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off, as always, with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. So what have we got for you this week? Well, we've got a bit of a small update for you just because it's only been a week, but as I mentioned last devlog, I wanted to shift where the every other update sort of fell on the calendar. So this week's update gives you one new toy, which I'm actually going to show off first. Although you might notice something's a little odd with my hands here. We've got instead of the Vive controllers here, we've got the touch controllers showing, and the reason for this is that after sort of a failed patch for an idea that I thought was clever and didn't end up being clever, I spent a bunch of time this week fixing a long-standing problem for those of you who are playing the game with touch, which is that the sort of pose of various objects didn't feel natural in your hands. Basically, the patch I had tried to implement was to apply a sort of global offset of all objects from where they were held with the Vive controller to where they're held with the touch. But the controller geometry is just too different for that. And so I went through and authored a custom pose for every firearm, magazine, melee, and thrown object. And what this relates to, and those of you who've been playing on touch will immediately notice the difference, is that we have a significantly more sensible hand position. I've basically done the best I can to match sort of the trigger and the sort of grip to the actual object with a comfortable sort of default firing angle. I went through about 4 or 5 iterations of this with some members of the community over the past week to get it feeling nice. You'll notice that magazines are at a much more convenient angle and position so that the controllers can come together without hitting each other for loading. Even for rifles over here, you can see that the rifle mag now actually feels like it's in your hand, as does the rifle's handle. Makes that much better. Excellent. Throw that over there. So, new toy. This is actually, if you haven't seen it, this is a firearm that was covered by the channel Forgotten Weapons that I immediately fell in love with, considering the namesake of the game, because it's a horseshoe pistol. It has this goofy horseshoe-shaped magazine. This is the Union pistol. So was from a French company in the early 20th century, and I think this is from everything the video covered. This was a bit of a failed financial venture, but a fascinating idea to make a 35-round select fire pistol at that time. So let's spawn lock this. It's firing 32 ACP, which hits about as lightly as anything in the game does. Pull that back. Let's take some shots. Ooh, all over the place, as I would expect from a machine pistol. But yeah, we can actually, what's really neat is that this is, I found this model initially, and there was only a CG version of it available, but the artist was nice enough to produce a real-time version of it for me. It's even got witness holes on the magazine there for, what is it, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35. It's a 35-round magazine. Delightful little sucker. Plus, it has this really handy feature that, you know, if you need to carry around a bunch of spare magazines, of course, we can just, I think I managed to get like 15 on here the other day before it, like, exploded on me. Etc. So yeah, so hopefully you enjoy that. It's sort of it's the lightest weight and softest hitting of the machine pistols, but I love its look, and there's something, this magazine was just too perfect not to use. Might have to actually add a horseshoe range here to the terrible, to the indoor range. Well, I hope you enjoy that. This update comes with a whole bunch of other bug fixes, which I'll cover as soon as I jump out of VR here. And yeah, so I'm going to be a little unavailable for this next week. Well, I'll talk about this. I'll get the headset off and then talk about that more. So yeah.
Yo! So now that we're out of VR, let's take a look at the rest of the changelog for this update. It's mostly bug fixes and changes, but a whole bunch of them are important. Under changes, I have altered the way that recoil functions for most two-handed firearms. And the reason for this basically was that forward stabilization was transferring a little bit too much of what I'd call muzzle flip into sort of linear backward energy. So I've tweaked that slightly. It should make them a little bit more proper. I got into a long discussion with a member of the community this week as we were viewing various videos of folks firing real firearms about how much muzzle flip should actually be present even for a perfectly trained marksman, sort of really holding on to the foregrips. So I've tweaked things a bunch of the place. A couple firearms that when grabbed by the foregrip were a little bit like fully automatic scalpels, like the MP7, have now been altered to actually have a little more wander to them, especially horizontally. So I mean, it's something I'm just going to keep playing with. I haven't paid a ton of attention to making sure that that was consistent and logical across probably the last 20 or so firearms that I've added to the game. So I'm paying a little more attention to tweaking that to make sure it feels right. As I mentioned in headset, we've got, custom poses for the Oculus Touch now for pretty much everything. I have not changed it for ammunition. At the moment, it's still going to float up above the controller, and that's partially just to aid chambering in certain firearms so you don't smash the rings of the touch controllers against each other, and also just because of the fact that it's like 180 prefabs, and there's no way for me to do it automatically in a way that is reliable. So if it's absolutely critical, I'll do it by hand and fix it, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. And then under fixes, just some assorted stuff. Fixed some item spawner images that were broken. Fixed a couple incorrectly placed reload trigger wells for handguns. I still need to fix a few more of them. I've done so many of these weapons in sort of several different generations of thinking over the past year or so that there's some design inconsistency in terms of how some of those sort of physics triggers work. That I'm in the process of slowly cleaning up. Let's see here. I fixed pose interpolation on a bunch of objects that just errantly didn't have it for some reason. It's what happens when you get up to like 70 firearms and like 74, 75 magazines. It's easy to miss something. What else? Oh, and a whole bunch of the trophy scoring thresholds for meat sequences were adjusted. A couple of them were because I had just made a typo and made the threshold too high, and then a couple are simply in response to being able to actually see the high score tables from the past week or so and adjusting based on that. It's very difficult for me to predict good scoring thresholds for some of these because the scoring is so time-based in terms of the bonus versus just actual scoring on the targets, that I'll come in with a notion of how fast I think some of you guys manage to shoot these things down, and then I'll look at the high scoreboards and be like, I don't even how many times are you doing it to do it that fast? Anywho, you've all really impressed me this past week is what I'm saying. And so I'll definitely be taking that into account in terms of future sequence design. So yeah, and that's about it. Just a couple other, minor little UI fixes and things like that. But for the most part, things are running pretty stably. I have a to-do list now, especially just because I find feature requests come in sort of bursts. Everyone gets quiet for a while and everyone's happy, and then all of a sudden everyone and their brother has ideas. So my to-do list is like forever long. But until then, as I mentioned, I'm going to be taking a break for a week because it's been a while and I need it, and I have a Warhammer army to finish for a contest that ends on the 13th. Any of you are 40k people, the Inner Circle army painting competition thing is ending on the 13th. So I'm going to be spending most of the next week painting miniatures and not staring at a screen. But after that, I'll be jumping back in to do more stuff for meets. I've got a whole bunch of new spawner and sequence ideas, as well as to get some new toys for you folk. Until then, I hope you are having fun with everything, and yeah, take care of yourselves. Peace.